La vida es corta sin parar, mirar y de reír para celebrar. Cada momento hay que gozar, como si mañana no va a llegar.
Hola, hola. Welcome to Entre Tías Amiguis, the podcast where we dive into the wild roller coaster ride of adulting. I'm your host, Adri Rodriguez, a queer Salvadorian native, a first-gen trailblazer, a multipreneur and licensed psychotherapist, here to share wisdom, stories, and real talk with my tías and amiguis and other incredible guests who inspire and uplift our community. I want to remind you that while I am a licensed psychotherapist, this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The discussions we have here are not substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Now let's dive into today's conversation and explore the journey of adulting together. Grab your cafecito, get comfy, and let's get started. So I'm Adri Rodriguez, the host of Entre Tías Amiguis podcast, and this is a space dedicated to everything adulting. And so I'm a queer, femme, I'm Latina, I'm a daughter of immigrants. I came to the U.S. when I was 16. And so all these experiences inevitably, they code everything that I do. You know, professionally, I'm a therapist, I'm a photographer, I do a variety of things. And I always start just sort of with my identities because I think that that's the lens that I'm a therapist who is a Latina and who is queer. And so all of these things are always coming from that perspective. And I'm really excited about having guests like you that I've been watching from far away. And then just recently had the opportunity to finally meet you and go to one of your events. And so I'm excited to have you here. And so for everybody, this is Naomi Fierro Peña. Naomi or Naomi? ¿Cómo prefieres?
Naomi
Fierro Peña. Her pronouns are she, her, hers, ella. And she's a soulful artist, engaging facilitator, and community curator. She specializes in creating artful wellness spaces for BIPOC adults. And after 10 years of teaching, which I have a lot of questions about this, she opened up her own business, That Art Party, art and play for BIPOC adults as means of healing and liberation for communities of color. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get to create That Art Party? Because your content is amazing. Your events are amazing as a person who has attended one of them. And I want to just attend all of the ones that you post. But yeah, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Know that I'm super honored to be here and to share space with you. Also, I love the name, Entre Tías y Amiguis. I'm like, yes. But yes, who am I and why am I here and how did I get here? Again, Naomi Fierro Peña, I she, her, and ella pronouns. And yeah, I mean, I will take a page from your book también. I am a queer femme, woman of color, born and raised in San Francisco, in the Mission and the Excelsior districts. And I was raised by beautifully complex communities of immigrants, Black and brown folks, communities of artists and healers and culture bearers. And I feel really proud to be part of that lineage. Yeah, so I always just like to start there. And how did I start that art party and what I'm doing today?
Yeah.
After 10 years of teaching, I was exhausted. I was burnt out.
Did you teach?
What did I teach?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I taught ethnic studies. I've taught US history. I've taught science, like all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I taught 8th grade and high school students.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But yeah, so I had taught for over 10 years and was just really tired, really tired, of feeling the constant pressures of really white supremacy culture, right? This idea that I needed to fit into this box and I needed to shrink myself. And, only if you would say it to him this way, he might understand. Or, Naomi, you should really fix your face in this meeting because it's really off-putting when you show your emotions on your face to everyone else. Or, wow, that was a really loud, colorful outfit that you wore today. Do you think that really fits into the professional space, and I'm not making up these comments. Like, these are comments that like people directly came to me to share. And I was like, there's only so much contorting and confining of yourself before you are completely disconnected and begin to lose the essence of who you are, which I think leads to getting sick. And so I was like, okay, I know that another world is possible through my experience as a dancer. That has always been a like sacred healing space where like there's joy and there's tears and community, but it also feels very like intimate. And just knowing that this creative ritual has the power to like transform and transmute whatever I'm going through, it was like, that's the energy I want all of the time. And so that's how I came up with the concept of creative play dates as a self-care ritual. And so because I believe that every person, and moreover every BIPOC adult, has an innate creative power. And if we tap into that, we can really begin to create worlds that don't yet exist. So
that's so beautiful. So it's maybe a little bit about me that you don't know is that before going into my private practice for my therapy, I was at a couple different schools for 8 years. So not as a teacher, but as an educator from more like the mental health perspective, providing supports. And one of my last schools that I was at, like I had this experience that it's like, I know white supremacy exists and like white supremacy is always around, but there's some ways that sometimes it's not as obvious. And this was like my first obvious time that it happened. And I was just like, wait, what? Like, this is not happening to me. And it was that there were other 2 Latina teachers and the school. And so we started hanging out. We had a lot of common things. And the teacher's lounge began a conversation that we were like trying to make the school into Little Mexico. And it was incredibly hurtful and offensive, considering that this was a school and a community that reflected more me and these other teachers than everybody else that was in the staff. And so the way that white supremacy, sometimes so very obvious and sometimes not so obvious, shows up. I've had professors, like I didn't wear red lipstick for years, hoops for years, because you can't be a therapist that is calling too much attention to yourself, right? Like, so all this messaging. And I'm a photographer, but I didn't know that I was a photographer until like one day I decided to buy a camera. And then I was just like, oh, I just want to take pictures of things, right? And so I love the concept of creativity sort of reconnecting you with yourself, because it was through photography that I realized that there was this other world, and I was advancing my career in this very rigid sort of like, I had like a vision what my career was going to be, because I was always playing with the photography on the side. It was almost like this, like, wait a minute, there's something else. And even here at this point of like having this podcast, this space of just like more ways to infuse like creativity in my own life. And so I really love and resonate with the journey, not an easy journey that sort of got you here, but a very necessary sort of awakening that then allowed you, it sounds like, the permission to explore other parts of yourself.
Oh my gosh, totally. I had an executive coach who was like, in our very first session, she said, just take 3 deep breaths and I want you to answer this question. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready. I was like, whoa, what do you mean? And she's like, okay, take 3 deep breaths and then tell me, who would you be if struggle never entered your heart? And that was the beginning of that art party. And that was the permission I needed to just say, like, what I have and what I know to be true in my heart is valid, and that's all that I need. And yeah, now we're a year and a half later in business and thriving. So here we are.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so we met through the networking Cafecito con Jefas, right? And so I've been watching you probably about a year now, a little bit more. And so what is the journey of the art party in terms of like, how do you envision the creativity, the space, but can you tell me a little bit about what kind of events and experiences are you hosting? What are the values that are guiding you? And I would love to hear like the experiences that people are sharing that they're having, because I, as a guest of one of your events, I was left transformed and moved and everything, but just like, what are you hearing about the space that you're hosting? Like, what kind of events are you doing? Would love to hear about them.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the question. So we host creative play dates once a month, and we change the medium that we play with and explore every time, because for me, the value for me there is honoring the process over the final product. It's not about every person is going to do a paint by numbers and have the exact same, photo of Selena, at the end of it. It's about, how do I breathe into the medium and let my intuition guide that process? And so some examples of creative playdates that we hosted. Just yesterday, we took over the Young Museum in San Francisco. It was open just to our community. And so imagínate, walking through these massive exhibits, seeing ourselves reflected in that space and not having to contend with the white gaze, like it was huge laughter and really deep sense of like intimacy and conversation, and just this sense of being able to breathe, in spaces like that. So that was one example, but we've done the one that you went to, right? It was a sound bath and floral arranging. I think flowers are one of these very kind of underestimated healing properties. And we pair that with sound healing, which you're literally shifting the frequency and the vibration in the room. We've done that. We'll do something elemental, like collage. We've had our very first sold out play date was a collage play date, and we partnered with a really dope artist. And that also brings me to another one of my deeply seated values, is that if one of us makes it, we're all making it. And so, although, yes, I am my own artist in my own right, I share the community that I've built with other local and emerging BIPOC artists, because if we're not rooting for each other, if we're not supporting for each other, then who else will, And so I try to collaborate as much as I can and bring in different artists so that our folks are constantly being like exposed and seeing ourselves doing and realizing the dreams that we have. Yeah, and what folks are saying about these experiences, I get really, like, I'm just so honored that people share these like very deeply, I think, intimate and transformational experiences with me and with the group. Yeah, what folks are saying. One, people say, I felt free today. I haven't felt.
I mean, that's not small. That's a huge thing to say.
Yeah. I was like, whoa. Okay. The number of times I've heard that, I'm like, okay, I'm doing something right. I've heard people come in who have been friends with this group of friends for like 10 years, and they'll share, I have not, like, I learned new things about my friend today. And I've been with this friend for over 10 years, right? Or people as adults, right? How hard it is, I think, to make new friends. People leave saying, I made new friends today, genuine new friends today that feel aligned, like, on a heart level. People make commitments to like continuing to play, continuing to create. And I think one of my favorite things that people leave saying is the person that comes in and says, I didn't really think I was creative. I didn't call myself an artist, but I do now.
Mm.
And
Mm.
that's big, because
I mean, these are huge.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And yeah, that's what folks are sharing at the end of like 2 hours together. So
I love that. And the question that comes to my mind as you say that is like about deconstructing, kind of like in a battle, internal battle, like, what is like to be an adult? What are adults, BIPOC adults supposed to be doing with their lives? Because I find myself, or as a first gen, as a daughter of immigrants, as an immigrant myself, that the life that I want to live, the experiences that I want to have are not the experiences of the people that I saw when I was growing up, right? The adults. I just turned 40 last year. And so thinking about like the 40-year-old women that I saw were not, just free to like choose and to have fun and to relax. Like they were very busy. They were, my own mother at 40 years old was raising a 20-year-old, right? Like I could not imagine myself in the same shoes. And so we're living a lot of like a very different life. And so what comes to my mind is around what is needed to deconstruct in order to be able to engage with creativity, with play, with these experiences. What is the battle of that you're seeing adults or even that yourself have had to like challenge within you, because we internalize these messages, right? Like we can believe in rationally, but then in our heart sort of like hearing the battle. And so how are you dismantling, deconstructing those old beliefs? What have you heard from folks? What are you seeing people having to deconstruct so that they can live a su manera, right? Like vivir a nuestra propia manera, de una manera que nos haga sentir bien and fulfilled and happy, right?
Like, oh, that's deep. That brings up all the things. I think I could just start for myself what I, reprocess or process through during these experiences. And then, yeah, a little bit of what I think folks are letting go and shedding as they enter this space. So for me, I'm constantly reprocessing and trying to let go of this idea that I need to prove my worth over and over and over again. I and again, and I will say this, and she's gonna hate it, but that's okay. My mom, so I recently won a pitch competition for my business. Thank you. And my mom maybe said, I was so surprised that you won. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. I was like, that's what you had to say? Okay. And so it is this constant need that I have in the back of my mind to prove, I think, to her and to folks that think like that, right? That what I'm doing is worth it, that it's valuable, that it's needed, and that it is a career. This is how this is my gift. And so knowing that I like actually don't need to validate that for anybody, that leads me to this, I think, image of like shedding for how folks enter the space. I think we come in with all kinds of messaging, all kinds of internalized messaging. And I think experience too. I think this is another thing I really thought about in creating this business is how much I felt like a parentified child. And there are studies, right? There are studies that show how BIPOC folks specifically are adultified at a much younger age. And so the idea that like returning to childlike play is actually so healing and worthwhile. It's a worthwhile pursuit. Is like a message I think that we really need to like hone in on and say like, no, I didn't need to go to art school. And that's not a knock on people that have gone to art school. And just it's like I don't need to go through this specific set of hoops and climb this ladder in this way to call myself an artist or creative or to engage in this ritual I just need to trust my own breath
Mm.
and my own intuition. And know, and this is the beauty, I think, of parallel play, is that I know that like I'm engaging in this and I'm trying to let go of the negative voices, right, in my head, that were put there by other people. But so is the person sitting across from me.
Mm-hmm.
What's really beautiful about the way that like what happens in my events is like you'll hear people be like, honor the process. It's not about perfection, right? Like we're telling each other like we're letting go of perfection today. It's just play. And it's a beautiful, like, it's funny, but it's also like we are supporting each other in the accountability to like release all of these negative messages that actually don't belong to us.
Mm-hmm. It makes me think about the crossover, the impact of internalized capitalism when it comes to play and creativity, right? Because I think there is this association, and for me, working years with kids, I would hear this thing of like, "Hey, let's do like an art project," and I was like, "But I'm not an artist. I'm not good at coloring." Right. So that there is a message that unless that you're good at something and good in order to produce, to sell, to give, to be admired to, like, right, and that's all internalized capitalism, that unless something produces like a monetary exchange or like a transaction of some sort, it's not worth doing or pursuing, right? And so not only do we have like the self-worth of like, am I good enough, that maybe comes up with play and creativity, but also is like, are other people going to value this? And it's not like value because you put effort, you put freedom, you put heart into what you're doing, but like that it doesn't translate into like a sellable piece. And so all of a sudden, like, it's not worth for me to play and to like do something creative. And I think that in itself is a message that we have to deconstruct, right? And not everything that we do has to be valued from the lens of capitalism to be worth pursuing, especially if it's something that fulfills your heart.
Exactly. And on that note too, it's like when you talked about how like young people are learning to say, I'm not an artist, or I can't draw, or I'm not good at this, right? Like that stays with you for the rest of your life. And I see it, right, with the folks that I work with. But this idea too of like, I'm not a perfect realist draw or illustrator, whatever word it is, right? And that's why we also like to say, make it ugly, make that art, make it messy, because that is another set of permissions that we need to just like value our own experience in the making, right? It's again not about a final product. It's not about how good it looks. It's about you tapping into your own breath and being brave enough to explore that through whatever medium, whether it be an oil pastel, a flower, bookbinding, all the things, like it doesn't matter the medium.
Mm-hmm.
The point is that you're trying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What is the connection that you see in terms of like being able to engage with play and creativity and the benefit in terms of mental health, particularly for BIPOC adults, right? Where like part of the liberation and part of decolonization is the belief that unless we're producing, we're not worthy, right? And so what is the benefit, the crossover between art and play that you're seeing in your mental health and other people's mental health? I think that's like an important component that we forget, that just being in the breath, being in the imperfection, being present, right, with the pen and paper that's in front of us, it's healing and it's necessary. But from your perspective, what are you seeing?
Yeah, how it just, I mean, for my own mental health, like it's transformed my own mental health. I I think about myself in the profession that I was in and this constant like worry, or just like my body will tell me, like I was immediately like head down, my shoulders are hunched. Like that is the disposition that I learned to have in this, right, very predominantly white institution, very capitalist and elitist kind of work environment. It really worked to disconnect me from my inner knowing. And that is really dangerous, I think, for our mental health. And how I am today, I know I can do and be anything. I know it. I believe it. I do it every day. Like that level of like, I'm that bitch confidence. And look, being an entrepreneur, owning your own business, doing something that hasn't been done before, that shit is hard. It's hard and it will knock you on your ass several times. And I get back up every single time. And I know that I can. And that level of like consciousness and confidence that like it's gonna be okay if I just focus on like what do I need in this moment and aligning to that where I can. That is it's liberating, and that's what I talk about all the time, and saying this is why art and play is such a healing and liberatory practice, because the more that we begin to ritualize creative self-care or whatever it is, the more that you harness that innate creative power. You know that no matter what, you can create something that hasn't yet been. And that's empowering. It's a really empowering state of mind, state of knowing. And I think, moreover, it allows us to really get out of our head. Like, there's, again, so much of the world, so much of these systems will continue to tell you you're not enough. That's too loud. You can't wear the red lipstick or the hoops or this color or that. You need to do X, Y, and Z. You need to do it perfectly, right? Like all of those things are components of like this white supremacist capitalist, and the list goes on and on and on.
The isms.
Right, exactly. Of all of that. And the more that we tap into play, we get to disrupt all of those messages. Actually, I don't need to be grinding all the time. I'm going to dedicate 20 minutes to doodling. And that's that transformational right there. Because one, you tap into your breath. You begin to like let go of all of the stressors that were like dancing around in your head. And you're able to do so in a way that is like connected from breath to medium. And so I think that's really powerful. And, you know, art is also a beautiful thing in its ability to transmute pain. I think art and artists have always done that. We can take the most painful moments and express and expel that and transform that through, and again, it's not just visual arts. Again, I started as a dancer. And so it's also it's breath and body and movement, and how we take something that is so painful, and through movement, you can literally put whatever song on you want and dance for 30 seconds and feel like a different person after.
You're in a different mood. Like it like lifts you up. Just something as simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah. And knowing that we have everybody has that. So
yeah, one of the things that I really liked about the way that you're going about curating your events is that not one event looks the same as you're putting them together, right? And so it makes me think about how are you creating, like what is like the guide as you creating this event in order to foster a sense of community, create support, because I left with a couple of new friends. I also met a couple of new like people that I had known online through your event, right? And so there is this like coming together and being in community, being messy, being childlike, being present in the moment, that when you're in community with other people, right? It's like you're doing that too. It's like it like gives you permission, right? And so in what ways do you think the work that you're doing through that art party is also filling in this need that we have as BIPOC adults to be in community with one another and to share these experiences with one another?
yeah, I mean, come through with the questions, okay?
I'm telling you, I've been wanting to talk to you.
Yeah.
Like, I admire, like, just from watching it far away. I used to live in the city, right? And so now, like, when I see your events, someone was like, man, like, I moved away. Like, why did I move? I was just so I could go to your events because every single one of them just looks so full and like full not only with people, but like with life, right? And so, yeah, how are you curating this like memorable spaces where people are coming together as a community?
Yeah. I mean, it comes from my training as a teacher. Really my training as a teacher. I am trained in restorative justice practices, which also coupled with my experience in the classroom, right? Like the way that I don't like to call them icebreakers because I'm like, that already carries its own connotation. But the way that I intentionally think about the design of the event, right? From like the timing of what my introduction is. And my introduction is different every time I talk to a new group, right? There are common threads that I share about my own personal story, but I really tap into ritual and I'm like, I sit and I ask and I sometimes in the shower, sometimes I'm here, there, whatever. But I'm like, what is the message I need to deliver today? What is it? And it's slightly different every time. And thinking about that, thinking about what is grounding, what does meditation look like? It's not always sitting in silence. That's actually not helpful all the time. And so what does it look like today? How much time am I spending on that? And then I very purposefully design the questions, their order as well, and how long people are spending on those questions as a warm up and lead up to whatever we do.
Mm.
So that's 10 plus years of experience, right? In facilitating, in teaching, in designing curriculum and space, right? For us. Which is why every time somebody comes at me with a wild budget, I'm like, you need to pay for this expertise because it is here. But anyway, that's an aside.
It's not, but you're tapping into like the, just because it's art and it's play, like there's already a component in there of like devaluing, right? And you have an expertise, you have something that you bring that deserves a payment.
Yeah, and I was like,
but we devalue art and play. We do not see the place of it as something that we should be investing in.
Yeah. And look, and like my events are not an average paint and sip. And my hat goes off to all of the artists who are doing their thing, making their money in that way. I think it's beautiful and that's different from what I'm doing. I bring a very different lens to to our creative play dates. And so yeah, I think about all of those things when I design something. And then you said something about like the importance of us being together in community as BIPOC adults, because that was a very specific question that I got in the formation of my business. People were like, oh, so you're not going to work with white people? Why? You're going to lose money. Right. I was like, one interesting assumption that our own people don't have money.
And that we wouldn't value this.
Okay. And I'm like, haha, joke's on you. But I'm like, okay, wherever that's not your family.
Yeah.
And even then, but wherever do you get to just be in a room of just people of color? How many times does that happen? And what is the quality of that experience? How is it different than like your experience in the world every day? Like, and it's also different than just like kicking back with your friends, right? That's also a completely different experience. Like, we're one that like, again, is really intentional in like fostering intimate and playful space. And I don't know how many other places there are that do that. And what I hear time and time again is that we're craving this way of, in your words, intentional living.
Yes, about intentional living, right? Because I think for me as a therapist, one of the elements of I want to discover your history. I want to take you through the journey of validating, understanding what you're going through, right? I want to find out what are the areas of healing, but ultimately it's about creating a life that is built based on like this learnings and understandings, right? So tell me about intentional living. How does that show up through that art party? How does that show up for you?
Yeah. I think what brought the topic of intentional living to this conversation for me was this idea, or not even idea, the fact that people time and time again will say, I'm in my 30s, I'm in my 40s, or I'm in my late 20s, what have you. I don't want to go to the club. And there's no knock on that, right? Like, I love to dance, but I don't want to go to the club every Friday. I don't got it in me like that. The needs don't work the same, okay? Like, it just, the levels of like hydration that need to happen are just different, okay? And so it's just offering us a very different way of social life, socializing and actually connecting. I think we're really craving connection with one another, and deep connection with one another, and connection with people that are aligned, right? In like your heart matters and soul matters, right? And so I think that's, yeah, we carve that third space, or we try to. And this is another thing that I really, really love, is when a client of mine brings their friend and they're like, I have a friend who just, I really think this is her speed. And like, I'm like always high honor. I'm like, yes, thank you. The fact that you trust me with your friend is like a big deal. Mm-hmm. And then two, I also sometimes get this story of like, she's really going through it right now, or, you know, she's had a really hard time, or what a XYZ has lived some traumatic experience recently.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we do. Like, let's not forget life
is life.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How often are we sharing that? Or again, thoughts to say we're transmuting that pain in a way that is not necessarily talk therapy, right? And I'm also not a therapist, nor do I pretend to be a therapist. I'm saying that our space, like, is the little gateway, very small portal to being able to like shift that energy that we hold.
A big barrier for people to come to talk therapy is like really the scariest, right? And we're like, what it's like to be with myself that deeply and that intentionally. And so I see as a therapist the value of having spaces like this that are not therapy, but that are therapeutic, that are invitational into the self-knowing, right? Into the self-awareness, into the what is the block, what is the thing that's getting in the way, right? And so I think that they're really valuable and can scaffold really into like bigger opportunities of healing. Because when I went to your event with the sound healing, right? I also happen to know the person that you partner up with. And sound healing wouldn't be like something that I was taught in grad school, you know, something that I would think as a modality of healing. And I remember sitting there, like laying there, because I was like literally laying down, and in the sound healing, and then to go play with the flowers and to be, that there was just like a moment of just like, oh my gosh, like I can be relaxed and I can be in my body, and I can be quiet the entire time, and just like knowing that there's people with that parallel play. Like, so that intention of just like, sometimes I want to do things, but I don't want to do them with people, but I want to be around people. I don't want to be drinking, but I also want to be socializing, right? Like all of these things, your events are really hitting home into how do we build intention around the friendships, the relationships, the way that we want to spend our time, the way that we want to spend our time with ourselves or with our friends. And that art party coming to Sacramento soon, people. So like, watch out, because I'm gonna be bringing her here so that she can
heard it here.
play for us, because it was just incredible to attend one of your events. And so the power of community, the power of being with one another, and that intention of our purpose is not to just work and to be grinding and to be in this like spaces of white supremacy like all the time. Sometimes it's inevitable, the type of labor work and professions that we have, we are in spaces that are not for us so often. And so you dedicating again and not like the paint and sip and everything, but it's like a curated experience about going deeper. I do see it as a stepping stone into opening up for people towards healing and to also be healing in that moment, right? No healing is too small to be considered healing. And so being able to connect with ourselves, like what a gift are you giving to folks?
Gracias. Oh,
En serio. Like that. Mire te chaponas de lejos. Like, I love what you're doing. I love what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
So tell me, as we kind of like wrap up, you talked about being in the mission. I used to live in the city. I used to live in the Excelsior. And so like the mission is something that like people, unless you've been there, you've lived there. My wife has also grown up in Mission. So it's like, I love San Francisco. What kind of experiences around art and expression did you see uniquely in San Francisco? Because that's something very different. Like you can be seeing art, I don't know, like in Arizona or something, but like seeing art in San Francisco is something else. And so how did you come to value art and play and fun? Because we could see it happening and not necessarily put value, but like, how did you come to value it for yourself? Because I'm thinking about the connection of like, how are you living the world a better place because of these experiences that you saw and others were passed down to you and now you're passing them on to us?
Yeah. Oh, I love this question. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. To grow up at the time that I did, in the neighborhoods that I did, it was like right before or right on the brink of like just the time before massive gentrification. I remember when that really big tower that I will not name was not there in the skyline. And so like I just lived a completely different life. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful and painful all at the same time, but still beautiful nonetheless. And so I remember taking the bus to a long ass way to my school, because I went to school on the opposite side of the city. And coming home and walking through beautiful murals, like the most colorful, vibrant, like it was both past, present, and future in these murals, right? Like I saw brown skin, like like just like really put, I think, on a pedestal, but also just felt so communal. And it also felt really political. Not in the way that I think, when we think about politicking and politics, right? Like not like that, but really deeply like a politic of the people. I will forever remember this one mural. It was a young brown boy who had his hands up, and there were several, like the ends of a long rifle or gun, several facing him.
On him.
They painted over it, of course, because where do we live now? But that like a mural like that was every day. And there were no words that I needed to like explain it to just like deeply know it. Right? What that was talking about. But also I grew up around musicians and dancers and like just like beautiful healers. I dance in Carnaval every single year.
Do you?
Yes, like that's the levels of art and play that I'm talking about, right? Like that's what I saw. I was like, this level of like dancing barefoot, hitting the congas with the like flesh of your hand, right? Like, and how deeply that's connected to your breath. is like, again, both beauty and pain, and so communal to be dancing with others, but not like in partnership in that way.
Mhm.
And to be like taking over the streets of the mission during Carnival and to be dancing throughout the streets, like that is a sense of freedom and liberation. And it's so deeply connected to like our cultural histories.
Mhm.
And then to see it live on and reinterpreted in bodies that are here now, right? That's a different experience too. And I think the other thing I will say, because I'm this way too, like that's one experience. But I also got hella hyphy. Like anytime some bass slaps come on, I'm ready to go. Okay. Like that's an also very important part of my upbringing.
Mhm.
Because the hyphy movement was like me coming up in school and like, yo, just a different time. And that was really playful,
Yeah.
really playful. And again, creating culture that now everybody wants to be a part of. Same, okay. Um, but just like I think San Francisco taught me a love of like getting hella hyphy. I have an appreciation for weird shit. My wife always loves my like my wife.
Appreciation for weird shit. Like, I know exactly what you mean. San Francisco also taught me that.
Right? I was like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, my wife is funny. She's from Long Beach. And so every time I'm watching like some obscure documentary or like whatever, she's like, there you go again, babe. They're weird shit. 5 minutes later, she's into the documentary. Okay. But just, yeah, just like it taught me that. And it taught me like this beautiful value that our people, we are art.
Uh-huh.
We are the culture. We are healers. And the fact that like now everybody wants a piece of this, like just a whole other thing.
We'll have a different conversation about that. We can.
Right, right. But I was like, but I knew it before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is deep ancestral medicine.
Mhm.
And again, just so proud to like be of that lineage.
I love that. So, just to kind of finish, what message do you want to leave with, for people to think about, to take with them? What is a place to begin in kind of getting back to that inner knowing, that self, that ancestral knowing of art, creativity? I know that folks are going to get a lot through just like the conversation. I feel so inspired and just grateful to get to know you more. But if you could like sum up and kind of like a takeaway, what do you want people to remember from hearing from you and to know about that art party?
Yeah, no pressure. Let's just wrap it up. Like, okay. I think where to start for me has always been a return to your inner child.
Mm.
I always wanted to be a hairdresser. And that's like one of the first things I did when I was like, oh, now I'm 30 something. And what do I want to do with my time? I'm going to try this hairstyle today. That it's not too small.
Mm-hmm.
It's not too silly. It's just like start. And so I think, yeah, returning to the inner child. 2, messy action is better than inaction.
Mm-hmm.
And I always come back to that. And I'm just like, oh, I'm getting in my head too sometimes. And I'm like, oh, no, just try it. It's okay. There's a typo. It's not the end of the world. Like,
Mm-hmm.
try again. So I would say that. And I think, what do I want them to know about that art party as I depart? You're invited. You're invited. And we'd love to play with you. And just know that no creative act is too small.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's what I got.
That's it. I'm like, no creative act is too small. Hmm. Yeah. The art party is available for traveling and hiring. So, folks, if you bring this experience to you, I highly recommend it. I'm going to be bringing it to Sacramento, so not too far away, but like, you all don't know what this is like to be part of this community. I'm really grateful that not only have I gotten to witness you kind of grow into seeing your business and the purpose getting even clearer every time that I talk to you, feels like this is even clearer and clearer. And I know that this is needed, and I'm glad and so honored that we have you, to bring these healing spaces for folks like us, by us, and for us. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate your time today, and there probably could be like a part 2, part 3, because there's so many more questions that I have. But for today, thank you so much. And so I will put on the show notes how you can get in touch with the art party, how you can, be part of the community, because I do want this experience for everyone. So thank you so much for today.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Adri.
Bye. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your tias and amiguis. Your support helps us reach more people and continue these important conversations. And don't forget to follow us on social media and stay connected. Until next time, remember to take care of yourself, embrace your journey, and keep living life with heart, vision, and creativity.